What happened is an incredible story that took place in a small Indian village called Nimitund. The village fell right in the middle of the territory where wild elephants lived, and locals weren't strangers to those animals. It was early in the morning when the first rays of the sun had just begun to illuminate the dusty road leading to the village. In a moment, drivers rushing to work suddenly found that a huge elephant was standing in their way. The animal was standing right in the middle of the road, waving its trunk and making loud noises. The first car that drove up to the elephant braked sharply. The driver, in panic, tried to turn around, but the elephant quickly approached the car. The man behind the wheel watched in horror as a huge animal loomed over his car. Soon a small tailback developed. Some drivers, who saw the elephant, turned around and quickly drove back. The others tried to drive around him on the roadside, risking to get stuck in the soft ground. The elephant continued acting very strangely. He approached the cars, then retreated, but did not leave the road for a minute. His actions seemed chaotic, but there was a kind of desperation in them. Also, locals accustomed to living side by side with elephants were baffled. They had never seen an elephant behave so strangely. Some have further ventured to guess that the animal was perhaps sick or injured. About an hour came and went, with nothing changing. The elephant continued to block the road, allowing no one to pass on it. Soon, people started getting out of their cars, forming small groups discussing what should be done further. Among all the car drivers stuck in the traffic was a local farmer named Rahul, who had lived in these parts of the country all his life. He watched the behavior of the elephant rather closely and saw something that the rest of them didn't. Rahul pointed out that the elephant wasn't showing aggression of any kind. Piffered by an innate instinct, he moved erratically to draw their attention to something. The animal did appear to convey something. Mustering courage, Rahul slowly emerged from his car. He started walking slowly towards the land giant, holding his hands in plain sight to show that he was not a threat. At the sight of the approaching man, the elephant calmed down a little. He stopped waving his trunk and making loud noises. Instead, the animal only stared at Rahul. When the man came close enough, the elephant stretched out its trunk towards him. Yet this movement was not threatening. Rather, it seemed that the elephant was trying to point to something. Rahul noticed that the elephant periodically turned its head in a certain direction. Each time he did this, his trunk stretched out in front of him, as if to show the way. All of a sudden, Rahul felt that the elephant actually tried to show him something. He decided to follow the animal and to find out what was going on. Slowly and with great care, Rahul started to move in a certain direction indicated by the elephant. The elephant, feeling that the man finally understood his intentions, slowly started moving forward. He kept looking around to check if Rahul was following him. The rest of the people watching this scene were astonished. Nobody expected that anyone would dare to get that close to such a huge animal, let alone follow. People were glad now the elephant finally cleared the way and that they could get on about their business. At this time, Rahul was following the elephant, keeping a safe distance from it. They went along a narrow path, leading further and further into the woods from the highway. The path wasn't simple. It snaked between trees and thick bushes. In some half an hour, the elephant suddenly stopped. They came out into a small glade with an old abandoned well in the middle. The elephant went up to the well and started low-pitch, concerned murmuring. Slowly and carefully, Rahul approached the well and peered inside. He screamed in horror. In the well, which was partly filled with water, there was a small elephant. His head and trunk were barely visible above the level of the water. In that instant, Rahul finally realized why the adult elephant was behaving so weirdly. It wasn't just an elephant, it was a mother elephant trying to save her cub. Rahul didn't waste a second running back to the road. He shouted, calling for people to help him. His screams turned out to draw the attention of other locals, and soon he was followed by a small group of people to the well. Having seen the well, people were shocked to find a baby elephant inside. They realized the gravity of the situation in an instant. Obviously, the poor little animal was exhausted and scared. Its strength had practically run out. One of the men pulled out his phone and called rescuers. The others started speculating about how they could support the baby elephant before professional help arrived. Someone suggested lowering a rope into the well, But this idea was quickly rejected. It is unlikely that people would be able to pull a baby elephant tied with a rope out of the pit, or the rope could break, and the second fall for the animal could end much worse than the first. Then, someone else suggested the beginning of pumping the water out from the well, but it was impossible. They did not have such equipment. Some time passed, but there was yet no solution. A baby elephant in the well began to make pitiful sounds, calling for help. His mom was standing by the well and would not move away and constantly trumpeted her trunk. At last, rescuers appeared. They immediately analyzed the situation and started building a rescue plan. The biggest issues were the depth of the well and the elephant's weight. Rescuers decided to use an excavator in digging a gentle descent towards the well. In this way, the baby elephant can get out on her own the moment the water is low enough. Work began immediately. The excavator started digging carefully, removing layer after layer. It was a slow process because one needed to be extremely cautious not to damage the well structure and not to harm the elephant. Meanwhile, the veterinarian, who arrived at the scene together with rescuers, attempted to assess the state of the elephant. He noticed several abrasions on the animal's body. It probably got them during the fall. He was afraid that the wounds could be infected because of the continuous contact with water. So he intended to anoint the visible damage with some antiseptic, allowing it to drip from above. The baby elephant started to behave restlessly, feeling a burning sensation from the medicine. But amazingly, he didn't try to avoid treatment. It was as if the small animal knew people were trying to save him. The excavator worked for several hours. The sun had already begun to set when the descent to the well was finally completed. Now the most difficult part of the operation was ahead the release of the baby elephant. Rescuers began to carefully dismantle the wall of the well. They worked manually, trying not to create unnecessary noise and vibration, so as not to scare the animal even more. A hole big enough in the wall was all that was required, and the well water started to flow out gradually. The level of water lowered and reduced, and little Jumbo could then stand safely on his legs. However, now another problem had emerged. The little elephant was too weak and scared to come out himself. He stood there, shivering, not even daring to move a step. Whereupon the mother elephant, which all this while had been watching, now began to act. She carefully went down the dug slope and came to a hole in the wall of the well. The elephant stretched out her trunk to the cub, carefully touching it. This seemed to give the elephant strength and confidence. He took the first uncertain step towards freedom. The rescuers held their breath, watching this touching scene. Nobody dared to touch because people realized that the most important thing now was not to scare the animals. The elephant, supported by its mother's trunk, slowly climbed out of the well. Every step he took was uncertain but final. You could see how tired and exhausted he had been from the time he had spent in the trap. Finally, after several tense minutes, the baby elephant completely emerged from the well. He stood on firm ground, shaking and holding onto his mom. The elephant wrapped her trunk around her cub, hugging him tightly. A loud trumpet sounded to emerge from her mouth, which expressed relief and joy, it seemed. Tears couldn't be held back while this scene was watched by onlookers. Even the most stern-faced rescuers furtively wiped their eyes as this display of maternal love touched their very core. The veterinarian felt the urge to get nearer to see the baby elephant, but did not want to risk it. He knew that giving the animals this time was all they needed to cool their heads and come to their senses. The elephant and the baby elephant stood next to each other some time. They appeared to be gaining strength before the long journey home. People silently watched them, not wanting to disturb such a touching moment. Then, the elephant suddenly turned to the people. She viewed each of those present, as if trying to remember their faces. There was a gratitude in her eyes that words could not define. Then the elephant did something unexpected for all the people who had gathered there. She lifted her trunk high in the air and produced a succession of short, melodious sounds. The sort of greeting for a farewell. The baby elephant, emboldened, raised its tiny trunk too and attempted to imitate its mother. His trumpet sound was a bit awkward, yet no less touching. After that, the elephant slowly turned around and walked towards the herd of elephants, gently pushing her cub with her trunk. They moved slowly, the baby elephant still weak from his ordeal. The people stood silently, watching the two elephants slowly move away towards the forest. Nobody said a word. Everybody was deeply touched by what had happened, amazed by the mental abilities of the elephant that had guessed to stop cars on the road as a way to signal attention to herself and ask for help.